Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show with me, Andrew Willett. We're in the midst of WNBA coverage and excited to bring our content to you. You can catch a pro basketball show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Without further ado, a pro basketball show. Hello and welcome to a pro basketball show. We are getting set and ready to talk about one of the premier teams in the WNBA. It's the New York Liberty, the franchise smiled upon by God this offseason. And it's all there. The pieces are in place, but there are some inconsistencies early on in the season. So we're going to talk about that now with Tyler DeLuca. Tyler, he's a host, analyst, creator, writer, producer. I hope I'm not missing anything. Graduate of the University of Oklahoma and working with the Committee Sports Group. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. Ready to talk some Liberty. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's been a fun WNBA season so far, and I think we're all looking forward to what the Liberty can accomplish this season. But as we start to get into it, this Liberty squad kind of made all the moves. And they made all the right moves.
Yeah.
They were at the bottom of the barrel, winning the lottery and going and getting Sabrina Ionescu. But along the way, all the right moves. The ownership has been invested in it. They've paid the tab. They're willing to pay the tab. They picked up the right pieces, whether that be Benijah Laney, Steph Dolson, Maureen Johannes, Han Shu, even DD Richards. And they lost some along the way, A.D. Durr, Jasmine Jones, including adding Natasha Howard and Crystal Dangerfield, which comes into play later. But they move on from a coach who does a great job in development in Walt Hopkins once a coach the caliber of a Sandy Brondello becomes available. And they win more games each year. It seems like the perfect story of development. 2 games 1 year, 12 games after that, 16. They just keep going they're winning a playoff game against the defending champion Chicago Sky a season ago. Everything's looking up and up. The developmental path, as I mentioned, it's all leading to a head as they went into another offseason, another period for players to go and improve their games, and then bam, they go and they trade for 2021 MVP Jonquel Jones, and that's the departure of Crystal Dangerfield, Natasha Howard, and then they also had Taylor Thornton in that move, and you're like, okay, they're making some real moves to push this process forward. But we all know in the back of our minds that there's something still there. And bam, Breanna Stewart leaving the Seattle Storm. Bam, Courtney Vandersloot leaving the Chicago Sky. And what are we left with but a super team in New York that was years in the making. We knew it might take some time to put it all together, but wow, what an absurd collection of talent that they have going on right now. Tyler, what were your expectations heading into this year, 2023, where it's still a very young season, but how have they fared under those expectations?
Yeah, I mean, going into the season, it kind of had to be championship or bust, right? When you have this amount of talent, I mean, it's super team versus super team. You know, I think that people weren't giving the other teams in the league enough credit, frankly. But ultimately, everyone kind of had a feeling, and it's still to a point feels like we're on a crash course in the finals for Liberty versus Aces. But going into the season, it had to be that, because when you get a player the caliber of Stewie alone could have just raised the expectations that much. But then you go and add JJ, you get Sloot, you get Kayla Thornton. Like, you are not just like other good players. This is another MVP. Kayla Thornton is a fantastic role player. Sloot is one of the best point guards the league has ever seen. Like, the expectations match the talent that they got. So I don't think that saying championship or bust is even being dramatic. I think so far this season, there's definitely been some growing pains, and I think that to a point was to be expected. I think that they're still, and especially now as they try and insert Johannes back in, I think that she's going to play a huge role in this. They're still figuring out lineups, but ultimately this season, I think anything less than, I mean, finals appearance, but even then, I feel like anything less than a championship kind of has to be a little bit disappointing if you're the Liberty.
And I mean, if we just go top to bottom from
Yeah.
what the talent is on this roster, I think that's a totally fair statement to make, like you said, because that starting five has five either former All-Stars or current All-Stars
Hmm.
on that team. And then the bench, I mean, Taylor Thornton is an underrated pickup. I think
Yes. Yes.
everyone loves Maureen Johannes.
Yes. That's
Um,
she's my favorite player on the team. I love MJ.
the statement when she's coming back, just
Oh, I was
awesome.
turned up. I was like, okay, now the super team's complete. Like,
Uh-huh. So some great stuff, but I think like it's a hard start to the season when you have to
mhm.
go in and play Washington like that
Yeah,
at
yeah, for
Washington.
sure.
And then to split a pair of Chicago games is fine. Chicago has been a fantastic surprise this
Yes,
season.
yes,
Nonetheless, I still think there's a ton of room to grow, and I don't think they're all that worried about it
yeah,
over in New York right now.
yeah. I mean, it definitely helps. I mean, Stewie is gonna hide a lot of problems for you. Like that is going to be very beneficial when you have Brianna Stewart on your team. I think you're right though. There's a lot of room to grow, and I don't think it's unexpected by any means. Like because it's very easy just to compare Vegas and New York, but it's a lot different in the terms of the growing pains that they have to have. Adding Candace Parker, who is a player that could literally have been added to any team and done exactly whatever that they needed from her, is very different than adding three, top tier players and some role players. I mean, this is a complete change of the entire roster. So there's definitely growing pains, and I'm sure that it was to be expected. I mean, it's hard when you have these expectations from the beginning, but ultimately, I'm looking at it as by the end of the season, it needs to be championship or bust. Right now, it's understandable that there's growing pains. I'm going to be taking what they look like after All Star break. That's when I'm really like, okay, this is what this team is probably going to be by the time that we get to the playoffs.
Yeah, let's start to get into kind of the offense and the defense on this team before we get into some of those different bench questions
Yeah.
that we might have. But they're third in offense right now, third in defense as well, and that puts them second in net rating at
Mm-hmm.
a plus 5.2.
Mm-hmm.
And that along with the field goal percentage, third in field goal percentage, or they're like fourth in mates, but eighth in field goals attempted per game. Just kind of crazy that they're third their infield goal percentage, 3-point percentage. They've taken the second most and they've hit the most, but
Yeah.
somehow sixth in 3-point percentage.
Yeah.
Just firing a lot of threes early on so far. And so far not getting to the free throw line a lot. Eighth in free throw percentage and last in free throws attempted and made. So I just what are you taking away from what you've seen from this New York Liberty offense so far this season?
I mean, it seems like a simple solution, I guess, in my head. But whenever the offense doesn't look great, it's because the ball is stagnant and they're not playing through Stewie. Like that's kind of just been the general like the kind of common thread that weaves together their droughts in games, and in the opposite, like we saw in that Chicago game. I was just rewatching it earlier today. There was a period where I think it was Sabali, Sloot, Johannes, Jonquel, and Thornton on the floor, and they were moving that ball like crazy, and they were getting wide open layups, wide open looks. And I think they lose some of that at points, whether it's with the starting lineup or with different lineups. But I think when they lose that, and that's when they kind of get suckered into that just taking threes and just launching. And they have very capable 3-point shooters, so it's okay for them to be taking a lot of threes. But I think that that's kind of where some of their problems have lied so far this season is whether it's just kind of ignoring Stewie at certain points, but I think happened more so at the beginning of the season rather than it has been now. And Stewie's been producing whenever they get her the ball. But also a lot of just like kind of whether it's standing around the 3-point line or a lack of pure ball movement where everyone's
Hmm.
getting involved and everyone's engaged in the offensive possession. I think when they're engaged, I mean, because one of my favorite sayings in basketball, the defenders can't move faster than a pass. They can't rotate. If you get them off balance, they're not going to be able to rotate that fast. And when they're moving that ball, they are moving that ball, and that's when they look their best on offense.
And I think I remember the possession you were talking about where I think it was off an offensive rebound
Mm-hmm.
and the ball gets swung back around to Marine Johannes, comes off the screen from Sabali and just whips that ball around. It was
Yeah.
either Sabrina or Sloot and then inside to JJ and then out to an open
Yeah,
corner three
there
for
was
Sabali.
several. Yeah, there was several with that lineup. Yeah, I think that was possession. I remember the Sabali three, and there was a couple just in that span of like 2 or 3 minutes, however long that lineup was in, and I was just like, I could barely keep up with the ball with my own eyes, let alone trying to be a defender on the court with them. So that's when they're at their best, and they have such amazing passers all across the board from 1 through 5, and when they make use of that passing, I mean, that's when I've seen them look their best so far this season.
It's true, and I think they're one of two teams to be in the top three in both offensive rating and defensive rating to start the season. The other team being Las Vegas, who was first in
That'll
both
do it.
categories.
Yep.
But that puts them second in net rating, and I guess to no surprise, net rating is a
Right.
great indicator. These are the two teams that we all had expectations for heading into the year. But you mentioned kind of when the ball moves around, it's just an unreal thing to watch, and it almost has to be that way
Mm-hmm.
with the amount of talent that they have out there. There doesn't need to be a point where any of them are taking tough shots out there. We know they all can, but with the amount of pressure that they can put on a defense, it can be just a little absurd. I know you mentioned the one thing where they are stagnant is kind of the slow point,
Mm-hmm.
but they still nonetheless first in assists per game and assist
Yeah.
percentage
Yeah.
at
And
nearly.
that's where that talent comes in. Where even when the offense looks kind of like, okay, what's going on here? You still got that much talent on the floor that you can make it shake a lot of the times, and still get some points on the board, just because the sheer amount of talent that they have on this team. And that's why it's so scary, because there's so much room to grow, and they're still at the top of these stats across the league.
Yeah, and I mean it's probably not too uncommon for a team with Courtney Vandersloot to be leading the league in
Yeah, that'll
assists per
definitely
game.
help.
And I just love when she is running this offense. She has all of
Yes.
the weapons. She knows exactly what she's doing, and I feel like she's pushing the pace very well.
Yes.
And last I checked, that's kind of one thing that New York is not doing a very good
Yeah.
job of is pushing the pace. I think they're 11th in pace, which came as a shock to me for the few New York games that I have been able to tune into, because it looks to me like when Sloot is running the point, the pace looks good. They get out and run a little bit, but when they are in the half court, though, which seems to be a little too much, I am curious if you think they need to get out and run more,
Yeah.
or if you like their current pace. But at the current pace, I think they're running a lot of sets in the half court that are a lot of fun. You got like double screens, shooters running off of them, empty corner pick and rolls. You got. I love seeing Stewie, and you mentioned this as well. They're playing a lot more through her,
Hmm.
but she plays a lot in the pick and roll as a screener or a
Yeah.
ball handler,
Yeah.
which is just
Which is
awesome.
which it melts my mind that she's equally as good as both. Like, that's just not fair at all.
uh,
But
Absurd so far this
yeah.
season. But then, I mean, you have string the string interactions. You got all these different plays in the half court that are working really well, and I think that's part of what Sandy Brondello is doing with
Mhm.
the squad is finding those right fits on the offense. But would you like to see them pump up that pace? If you're an opposing defense,
Yeah.
what do you want to see from this team? Whether that be slowing them down and making them run some of these awesome half
Mhm.
court sets, or I guess what's your preference for this New York squad?
I think it really is lineup dependent, and because they
Hmm.
have so many different players, I think like the biggest thing for me, and we've seen such limited time with Johanna so far, just because she's just coming back from overseas and everything. But watching that Chicago game, those minutes where it was Sloot and Johannes versus Sloot and Sabrina, the pace is completely different, and I think that that's a huge thing, because MJ is just so good at pushing the pace,
Uh-huh.
and she's such a like, no matter where you are on the court, she can find you. And same with Sloot, and a lot of times same with Sabrina, where it's such a threat. And I think that MJ provides a different switch, where it's when you have her in, that's when I want you playing fast pace. That's when you can run the floor. And we saw John Quell who has been kind of slow getting going this season. With when MJ was in and pushing the pace, she was getting more easy looks than I had seen the entire season so far. And when your player's struggling like that, that's what you want to try and do. So I think it is kind of lineup dependent. I mean, because obviously they're incredibly capable of succeeding in the half court. Like, that's not a question at all. But I think when you have Sloot and MJ on the court together, it because they can still obviously operate in the half court as well. I've been loving seeing that duo so far, just since MJ's been back. That duo at the guard is something I really like, because they can do a little bit more of both. And when you're able to mix it up, I think that's the biggest thing, is that don't operate in a box of like, okay, we're
Hmm.
just going half court, or we're just trying to run, because running is nice and everything, but also you can't it's hard to do that all game and still be active on the defensive end. So I think it's lineup based, but I'm loving the mix. I think they found kind of the perfect mix in that Chicago game in those minutes with Sloot and MJ. I loved watching them playing together.
I was curious before we get into the defense where you were on kind of the rotations of this squad because that starting lineup just so much talent as we
Yeah.
mentioned. But then even I mean you got Benai Laney and Sabrina Ionescu playing oftentimes in the third, fourth, or fifth uh, option in that offense. I'm curious. Do you want to see them kind of roll them out a little bit more with second units to kind of run those second units, get those opportunities to keep refining their games like that, or how do you feel about how Coach has done with
Yeah.
these groups?
It's been really interesting, and it's a tough problem, but also a great problem to have because they just
So
have
much
so much.
depth.
There's so much talent on that team. When it comes to Sabrina and Laney, I think Laney and Thornton are perfect kind of interchangeable options at that small forward spot. Where I'm cool with how Laney has been going. I would like to see. I love Thornton's defense as well,
I
and
would love
so
to see them throw both of them out there
same.
at the same time,
I would not hate that at all because
even to
the
close the game.
defense. Yeah, and I think that Sabrina has honestly, I mean, being frank, has kind of been the weak link a lot of the times for me
The slow
because
start.
it's a slow start. I think she mentioned a hamstring the past couple of games where she hasn't looked great, frankly, and that it could very well be that. But throughout, whether it's, I think Sandy, I forget exactly the exact quotes. I don't want to misquote her, but it was something along the lines of like she's a floor spreader and a ball mover. And frankly, right now, I don't know if I would not rather have MJ doing that in the big moments because I can't lie. I'm an MJ like that's she's one of my favorite players in the league. So I'm not gonna sit here and act like I might not be a little biased. But I I think that and like I said, that mix of pace and half court. So I wouldn't mind seeing Sabrina running with that second unit a little bit more if they want her to be that ball dominant and really harp on the pick and roll, whether it's with Dolson or Sabali. But I think in the inverse of that, I would also love to see MJ with the super team starters a little bit more as well, possibly in place of Sabrina in some of these minutes and really kind of be able to pick up the pace in that.
No, I think I'm gonna differentiate from you here. I'm gonna rock with Sandy and say, hey, you've got this five all-star lineup. It'll take some time. I think it's been a slow start. You mentioned JJ. I think Benai Laney, her shot just hasn't seemed to come around
Mm-hmm.
yet. That will come. It's almost like surprised by how open they are.
Yes.
Because you did two on the ball is very common when
Yeah.
you have the stars that New York has.
Mm-hmm.
What is the defense supposed to do when you put two on
That's
the
a great
ball?
question because when the shots are falling, I don't know what the answer is to that question. I have no idea.
And so I think you keep running it into the ground with that unit. You did Sabrina Dillon, you did JJ Dillon, you did Laney Dillon. Look out.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, I'm right there with you with MJ though. I thought
Yeah.
she and Sabrina should have been starting last year the whole
Yes,
time.
yes.
It would have
I
been
was screaming from the mountaintops, put MJ in. Like,
such a fun backcourt right
yeah,
there. And I agree. We got to get some more MJ minutes. That was one of my
yeah.
talking points here. As I start to transition to the defense, I looked at some of the points off turnovers, second chance points, fast break, and points in the paint is my last one. But about middle of the pack up until opponent fast break points, they'd keep their opponents pretty low. They're second in the WNBA there. But then first in points allowed in the paint. So they allow the least amount of points in the paint while being second in points scored in the paint. It's kind of an utter domination. And
Yeah,
when you look at the front court that they have, it's really no surprise with
yeah. It adds up.
multi-time MVP and in Brianna Stewart and
Mhm.
John Cole Jones.
Yeah,
You're going to dominate the paint.
yeah. And I mean also their depth as well. I've Dolson's been in there. I honestly I'm ready to see the Sabali minutes that we've seen so far have been fantastic. And obviously she's just kind of getting out there and running and everything. But I've been loving what she's been providing, the spacing, the passing again, and on the defensive end too. Like I said, like they just have so much depth across the board. It's insane. And I think it also helps that like whenever their guards are kind of crashing in, or especially on the rebounding side, they're not really allowing the they're not really giving them much space to operate within the paint on top of having two former MVPs down there that are very, very capable defenders as well. So I didn't know that they were the best in the league, but I can't say I'm surprised to hear that by any means.
Well, I mean, you just look at the Aces and New York with
Yeah.
Candace Parker and Aisha Wilson on one side and John Jones.
I gotta feel like
And
we're gonna be comparing them a lot this season for some
yeah,
reason. I don't know. It's kind of seeming like that.
but to get into the depth that you mentioned,
Yeah.
I had two questions for that. Are you surprised that Sabalis didn't a lot of run over like the Han Shu? I know it's been great to see her out there, but
Yeah.
I also everyone loves Han.
Oh yeah, if anything, frankly, I was more surprised by the initial minutes from Dolson over Han. Like that kind of was, I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And I'm surprised to see it continue. I think Sabli's been great in those minutes, and I think that she's done a fantastic job, and I've really liked what I've seen from her. But I don't understand what Han did to Sandy. I don't like, even if it's just in short bursts here and there, or whatever. I'm not talking put her in the starting lineup or anything, but she can't get nothing. Like, so yeah, I'm absolutely shocked by that, because I mean the trajectory of her, just improvement across the board last season was amazing to watch, and I was really looking forward to seeing that again this season. So I'm definitely shocked, and I would love to see her get more minutes.
And how have you felt about the Steph Dolson minutes?
Eh. Honestly, like that's about how I feel. Like I would, like I said, I was surprised that she was getting those minutes initially, and I haven't really seen much of anything to change my mind on that. If anything, it's just like, okay, now you have Sabali and Han, like that are like we haven't seen Han to know how she's performing this season, but Sabali's been coming in, and there's some rookie moments here and there, but ultimately like providing very productive minutes and
True.
everything. So I wouldn't, if we just saw those Dolson minutes start kind of waning off a little bit and these other ones increasing, you'd hear no complaints from me personally. I definitely understand the impact that Dolson can have, and what she brings to the team, but at the same time, I would be really interested in seeing more minutes just from the other two, just to see different combos and different duos in the paint, and things of that nature.
And I think it helps too to have a veteran like that with the
Yeah, for
passing
sure.
ability,
Yeah,
a bit down low when you
absolutely.
have JJ coming off of an injury like that.
Hmm.
And I just think Sandy really trusts Steph
And
a lot
I think
out
that's
there.
I think that's exactly what it comes down to. Really, it's just trust at this moment. And I would also, like, there's times where I think that she could let Han go out there and, try and build that trust. But I definitely think that it's experience. It's kind of going back to those expectations of, it's championship or bust. I want the person that's won a championship out there. It can kind of just, it could be as simple as that. And I think it very well might be. And it's, I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's also hard to argue with that type of logic, with these expectations, and this much pressure on this entire team.
Agreed. And just to recap on this depth, you have the two bids there. You have the two bids off the bench, and then Hanshu,
Yeah,
who's not getting a bunch of minutes, which like it's going to be tough to find minutes there. And I think that's why they're playing so much double bid. My question there is, could we start to see some single bid lineups, maybe some completely switchable lineups out there?
that sounds like fun. That sounds like a good time to watch right there. I mean, I think they'd be more than capable of it, especially if they go Laney and Thornton, and you got two people that can very much switch and can bang when needed, and can go to work on defense. I think that's absolutely something that they should be exploring. And I mean, it's not like a Stewie or a Jonquil couldn't lock down the paint. So like I would love to see that. But I also understand why they continue to go double big, because they have just so much depth, and that most teams can't match for the entirety of a game. So there's bound to be mismatches at different points, just because you're just consistently jabbing at them with this size, and you're jabbing and jabbing, and one of these times that right cross is going to come open, and they're going to have that mismatch. So I don't blame them, but I would absolutely love to see some single bigs.
Yeah, I mean, I just imagine a lineup with Stewie running around and playing the switchable five
Mm-hmm.
with Laney, with Thornton, and I guess two other guards
Yeah,
at that
yeah, two of the
point.
guards. Yeah, that sounds. Like I said, that sounds like fun to watch. So
Uh,
I'm game for it.
maybe a Jasmine Willoughby in there to be even more switchable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So and then real fun question before we have to get into the defense is a massive lineup where you could see
Oh
JJ and
yeah.
Stewie. and Honshu and maybe Savali
You know what?
with Elaney. I don't know.
Let's bring the chaos. Let's do it. Why not? Why not?
So I think a lot of fun options there, but they're sticking with a lot of that double bid at least early on.
Yeah.
They probably will just because there's a lot of talent there on
Yeah.
this team.
Yeah.
But defensively, I think they have all the tools where they're mixing in a lot of switching. There's still some miscommunications from that.
Yeah.
They mix in zone occasionally to like just to throw the offense off guard just a little bit to start a quarter, start a after a timeout or something like that. And like we've mentioned, the length down low with JJ and Stewie especially with her mobility,
Yeah.
just absurd. It's why they're dominating down there in the
Yeah.
paint. But my one concern with the defense, and it's kind of gone away to start the season, is the perimeter defense. Do you
Yeah.
have any concerns there?
Oh, I do. I was actually about to. I was gonna be my next thing I brought up because I mean there has to because when you're, I mean look at the talent that Chicago they just played them. The amount of talent on the perimeter that Chicago has defensively they don't have those supreme lockdown defenders on the perimeter. So it's tough and they don't really have the athleticism. So when teams are when their perimeter players are just moving and going, it's really hard for New York to try
Mm,
and keep up with those type of players. I think Chicago is the perfect example of what we saw where players can just pop off. Honestly, just because their defenders just aren't to the caliber of their post defenders. They're just not, and that's just kind of the reality, and that's kind of the trend with their top guards. Was
mm.
it's kind of the common thread between them is they're pretty solid offensively, but how are they going to handle going against athletic guards on the other side? So I think that's absolutely a valid concern.
Eh, I mean, it obviously does help a lot when you've got that back line in
Yeah,
JJ and
yeah, yeah,
Stewie.
yeah.
With some of the smaller guards that, and I think also what I'm seeing effort wise from A Sabrina Ionescu has really impressed me. Like Sloot gets beat off the dribble, and I see Sabrina just hopping right over from her defender
Mm.
to run back and stop the player who just drove past Sloot, and they rotate from there. I think the rotations to get a little more crisp as
Yeah.
well. I think some of their drop coverage could use a little bit of work with,
Mm.
especially with JJ, because that's what they're running with JJ. That's what they're running with Steph Dolson.
Yeah.
They switch. I saw them switch a lot against Chicago, at
Mm.
least. What system do you think they will settle into down there?
I mean, I think when you have bigs that are capable of switching, I think that if once they get the rotations down and the communication down, I think that it's just a matter of time more than anything else. I don't hate that as the system. I really don't, and I think that they've shown that they are capable of doing that. But I think you're absolutely right though. That some of the rotations need to get crisper, and like I said,
Hmm.
I really do just think that that's just a matter of time. And once like I'm giving them grace till post All Star, and once All Star gets here and they're still missing rotations, I'm gonna call them out, but and I'm gonna feel a type of way. But until then, I think that I'm giving them grace for that. But I don't see that as a problem when you have defenders that are capable of doing that, and it's not some instant mismatch when you get a big on a guard because their defenders can do that, and they're capable of quickly rotating back whenever they get the chance as well. So I don't hate that as their primary system, and I also like the idea of them throwing in zone just to switch it up here and there. I like you mentioned you've seen that a couple of times, and I don't have a problem with that either. So it's just a matter I really think of just locking down their system and making sure
Hmm.
that this is what we want to run. We are going to do it and do it and do it until we get it right, and we are 100% A plus at it. And when they do get A plus at it, it's going to get scary because they those defenders down lower, that back line is scary.
Absurd. I mean, just the talent on this roster. I think it's kind of the same as it was offensively that we just talked about as defensively. Just so much versatility in what they
Yeah,
can do, who they can throw out there because of the amount of talent that they have. New York, going to be a lot of fun this season.
yeah,
I guess, Lucas, anything else?
yeah. I mean, it's just gonna be fun. Like it really is. Like I'm just I can't wait to see the final form of New York. Like that, I think that's my biggest thing. Is like I'm enjoying the season. Don't get me wrong, but I'm eager to get to those playoff times, and then get into those series and just see what does New York look like? What did they get set on? What did they finalize themselves on? What are their strengths? What weaknesses do they still have? Just because when you have that much talent, like you like as an opposing team, besides maybe Vegas, just because they have that much talent, like you got to pinpoint those weaknesses and you got to figure out, okay, where are the soft spots in the coverages? Where are the cracks in the armor of this supreme New York team? And I'm excited to figure out which teams can figure it out and what cracks there even will be by the time we get to the end of the season.
Tyler DeLuca, what are you working on right now? Where are you at in the WNBA season?
Yeah. Now, right now, I'll be going down to a couple of Dallas games throughout the season. I'll be at All Star, but mainly just doing some digital content just on my own socials, and then as always with the committee. So making sure you're tapping in with the committee. That's the place to be.
The Committee Sports Group. I know they're having some fun with Isabel Harrison tonight.
Yeah, we got her on our playback, and it's gonna be fun. Hopefully, that's something that we could do more. We get some more players on there and everything, because that's a really really cool thing to be able to watch with an actual player on the team. That's dope.
It's incredible. The work you guys do, awesome. Tyler, thank you so much for joining a Pro Basketball Show today. Had a lot of fun. I think the New York Liberty are going to have a lot of fun. We're all going to have a lot of fun watching them. The talent off the charts, still continue to figure things out. But Tyler, again, thank you for bringing the expertise, and we will have to talk to you again soon. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into a Pro Basketball Show. You can catch a Pro Basketball Show on streaming services such as YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify with live broadcasts on playback. Make sure to follow us at APBShow on social media platforms such as Twitter and Instagram, with more coming soon. Until next time, I am Andrew Willett. Thank you for tuning in.